All right, guys, welcome to PBJJF Podcast. We're here for another podcast. So we're here with Professor Lamonte Tyler. So he's coming from Ratenstown. Ratenstown. That's a hard word for me. Randallstown. That's such a hard word for me. Thank you so much for coming here today.
You're welcome.
It'll be a pleasure to share and talk to you about many subjects, jiu-jitsu, but a lot of non-jiu-jitsu related stuff. So I want to thank you, our sponsors. We have Perkins Dental Care, the best dental office you're going to find. They are not only specialists on what they do, but they are also jiu-jitsu practitioners, Dr. James, it's a jiu-jitsu blue belt, so he really knows how to deal with the jiu-jitsu community. So make sure you guys go to Perkins Dental Care if you need any dental service. And thank you, Brave Kimonos. Brave Kimonos was our first sponsor, and they're with us since the beginning, and it's such a big support, And Brave Kimonos offers the best jiu-jitsu gear, guys, that you can find. Gis, rash guards, shorts, all the gi and grappling gear you need. So I personally use every day, and they're great. So if you guys are looking to jiu-jitsu products, go to bravekimonos.com and use PBJJF10 for 10% off. If you're a school owner and you wanna resell the products, you can go and you can apply for the wholesale account, so you can receive the discount to wholesale and resell the products at your school. And they don't require a lot of products, so you can really manage your inventory with not high volume. So you can just purchase a few products, and you can get going that way. And thank you for another sponsor that we have is the Immigration Law Service. So Santos Law Firm is a high-profile immigration law firm. They're really specialists in what they do, and they are very specialized into the jiu-jitsu community. The type of visas that you need to come to the United States. If you're here, what is the best way to go from each individual? The O1 visas, the B1. There's so many other visas that they are the best immigration law service in the market. If you need or know anybody that needs it, and if you're in jiu-jitsu, you have to go to Santos Law Firm, because they will help you, and they will tell you if your case is they can take your case or not. They're gonna be honest to what you're looking for. So thank you, Santos Law Firm. Flavia is the owner of this law firm, and they've been great. We have been working with them in so many visas, and they're the best. Thank you so much, and that's it, guys. So make sure, if you're watching right now, make sure you like, subscribe, and make sure you click the bell button and share this podcast with everyone out there. If you have any questions, you send us through the comments, and we might be able to answer. Don't forget that you also have the opportunity to support the channel by subscribing to the channel as a member. You can become a member and be a very supportive member. So with the membership, you can do $4.99. You click on the join, and you will support a jiu-jitsu channel that is trying to build and bring many professors to talk and share knowledge and share their knowledge with you. All right. Thank you guys so much. Thank you, Professor, for coming here today. I appreciate your time.
You're welcome.
And let's start. So why did you start training? Why and how you got involved with jiu-jitsu?
So I'm going to actually talk about prior to jiu-jitsu. I am from Baltimore, Maryland. I graduated Northwestern High School, joined the Army. I wrestled 2 years for the Army. And then after I got out the Army, because I spent 4 years, so I was in Desert Storm in Somalia. But after I got out the Army...
Thanks for your service.
Thank you. After I got out of the Army, then I went to college. And I thought, because the particular college that I went to, we didn't have a wrestling team. So I decided to play college football. Did not think that I would ever do anything pertaining to wrestling. Tore my ACL playing football. And for 18 months, I didn't do anything because it took that long for my knee to heal from the ACL surgery. In 2000, a friend of mine was driving around trying to find tractor trailers to show his son, and he ran up on a school that said Gracie Jiu-Jitsu. He walked up, he came back to me and was like, "Hey, I found this school where they do Jiu-Jitsu and Muay Thai kickboxing." I was like, "What is that?" He said, "UFC." I said, "I've never seen a UFC. I don't know what a UFC is." He was like, "You used to wrestle, so I think you might like it." I said, "All right, I'll give it a try." He said, "First class is free." So I went out, and the name of my team, my former team, was Team Rock out of North Carolina. So I went out, and they said, "All right, you can have a trial class." And I did my first class, and my instructor was like, "You don't have to sign up now, think about it." Oh, no, I was like, "No, I'm hooked. I'm hooked."
Day one.
Day one, I was hooked. I even gave him my check right then and there because I was like, "No, this is what I've been looking for." So that was February 21st, 2000. And at that time, we were doing Muay Thai, Western boxing, and Vale Tudo. So everybody says MMA today, and most people don't even know what MMA is. Vale Tudo, Portuguese term for anything goes. So that's what I grew up on, Vale Tudo. I did my first fight in November 2001 against Brandon Vera. 10-minute round in the ring. And back then, I didn't know who Brandon Vera was. No one knew who Brandon Vera was. Of course, I lost, but we went the distance. So I don't feel bad losing to Brandon Vera. I don't feel, because
It was Vale Tudo or MMA at that time?
So in 2001, we still called it Vale Tudo. I didn't know anything about this tall, lanky dude who I was about to fight. I just know that I looked at him and was like, "Yeah, I can take him." It didn't work out that well. It didn't work out like that. But hey, that's the past. And do I think I can take Brandon Vera now? I would never say yes, because I haven't been fighting like that. And Brandon Vera was at the top of his game before he retired. So I will never, ever, ever, ever call Brandon Vera out. But I've had my experiences with a lot of former UFC fighters, not in Vale Tudo or MMA, but in jiu-jitsu tournaments. So that's how I got started. And then January the 4th, 2004, I actually decided to jump into judo because I was coaching youth wrestling as well. And just so happened, the person who was the head coach of the particular program where I was coaching, name was Ernesto Vera. And after Ernesto left, I took over as head coach. Then I found out Ernesto was Brandon Vera's brother.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
Such a small world, right?
It was, and I always looked at him, and he always wore these, I think it was Grappler Quest T-shirts, and I was like, "What do you know about that?" He said, "Yeah, my brother does that stuff." But he never said who his brother was. So I thought it was funny that after he left, that's when I found out who his brother was.
That's great. So how was you got introduced? So you said you started getting introduced with judo. So how was your journey on training judo?
In judo, because of my jiu-jitsu background, I achieved the rank of brown belt in 10 months in judo. And then in 3 years, I was a black belt. Not to say that judo is one of those arts where you quickly get your belt, but I competed so much. And then in judo, they go on points whenever it comes to promotion. So the first year I received my black belt. The next year I competed in the American Canada Games, or they call it the AMCANs. I was a first degree, and I went up and I had to do a round robin with this sixth degree. I'm 5'10". Back then I was like 260 pounds. That gentleman was 6'4", about 350 pounds. Now, sixth degree. And I beat him twice. And then the president of the whole Ohio promotions came up to me and was like, put your paperwork in for your second degree. So it took me a year after getting the first degree, got my second degree, and then I competed so much, and then a few years later achieved my third degree. By that time, I called it quits with competing in judo. So 8 years after I received my third degree, I obtained my fourth degree. And currently I teach judo along with my jiu-jitsu, and I teach Muay Thai kickboxing as well.
That's awesome. I see. I've seen your students coming to PBJJF. I think you're doing such a great job.
Thank you.
With your students. And so, what is the change that you see happening since you start jiu-jitsu, and what is the positive change that is happening in in your community right now, since that time to now?
So the major change that I've seen in jiu-jitsu, whereas back in the day, back in 2000, the majority of the instructors throughout the United States were blue belts. And whenever you tell someone a blue belt runs a school or ran a school, they were like, a blue belt? And then I remember the first time I saw a purple belt. First time I saw a purple belt, I flew out to California, to Torrance, to train with Horace Gracie. And I may have seen about 2 or 3 purple belts. And back then, to see a purple belt, that was like celebrity status. So March 2001, North Carolina received their second purple belt, because that's when I got my blue belt, and my instructor got his purple belt, and he was one of 2 purple belts in all of North Carolina. That is a major change, because now you can go to almost every school and see at least 1 purple belt. And back then, you would have a school and maybe travel an hour and a half away to see the next school. Whereas now each city is saturated with schools. I remember a gentleman tried to ask me to go down to Puerto Rico and get a school started. And I was like, no. He was like, you could do really well because we don't have any jiu-jitsu schools in Puerto Rico. I was like, I'm not interested. I didn't want to move down to Puerto Rico. One, the hurricanes. I didn't want to deal with hurricanes like that. But then I thought about it years later. Now that Puerto Rico has a lot of jiu-jitsu schools, that gentleman who told me to move was correct. I would have had a great school down there just because they didn't.
You're a pioneer. Being a pioneer.
So I became the pioneer, or as someone actually told me in Charlottesville, Virginia, I became the godfather of jiu-jitsu in Charlottesville, because there was a school there, but a gentleman had a school for 2 years, and when I moved there were only 4 students. But he could not grow because his attitude towards the students, if they were to beat him, like while rolling, then he turns around and pretend like it was a tournament and they hurt him, and next thing you know, they quit. So then I moved to Charlottesville, obtained my purple belt, opened up my school, and like 2 years later, that same gentleman, he had left, went to England, moved back to Charlottesville area, and became my student. When he came back, at that time I probably had about 60 students. Something that he tried to achieve. So when I went back to Charlottesville, maybe about 5 years ago, there was a black belt there who called me the godfather of jiu-jitsu in Charlottesville. And this black belt knew me, but I didn't know how. And apparently he took my class or trained with me. I mean, he wasn't a regular student of mine. It was somebody who would just periodically do drop-ins. But then he moved to Charlottesville, and now Charlottesville have 2 schools.
I think there was a tournament inside a school there that I took some students to go and compete. I don't remember the name, but do you remember any names of the schools in Charlotte?
So one of them is Charlottesville BJJ, and the other one is Gracie Charlottesville.
Maybe Charlottesville BJJ.
Charlottesville BJJ is ran by Gordon Emery. Gordon used to be my assistant. A month before I left Charlottesville, I gave Gordon my school. And his school blew up. Like, I gave him the school with about 60, 70 students. Probably within a year, he doubled that number.
That's awesome.
And then he left the location where we originally started because he outgrew that location real fast. And if you've been to Charlottesville, you know that's a college town. So for him to actually grow that school in a college town and still maintain his numbers, that speaks volumes.
Yeah.
And a lot of them students who go to University of Virginia, they don't even go back home. They want to stick around and continue to train with Gordon. And I'll commend him every day that I see him for a job well done. Currently, he's probably walking around with 300-400 students.
That's awesome.
But when I was about to leave Charlottesville, I said, the goal is to give you this school and you'll never have to work for anyone else in your life. You'll be working for yourself. When I left Charlottesville, he worked for 3 months and then went out on faith and just ran the school full time.
That's incredible. I think that's it's a beauty of how jiu-jitsu is growing, right? Because when you teach, you become more professional. You're able to actually turn it into a profitable business. People can live very well nowadays with jiu-jitsu, something that wasn't possible 20 years ago. And so and you also you're jiu-jitsu black belt, you have your own school, and I see there's a Gracie that's a hard word,
Gracie Randallstown
in Silver Spring area too, right?
Right. So Gracie is called Gracie Randallstown at Hillendale, which is one of my affiliate schools. And when a gentleman opened it, when he told me he wanted to use the name, and I was like, Randallstown is a city in Baltimore County, but he wanted to be my affiliate, so he actually continued with that name. So I gave him permission to use Gracie Randallstown. Even his business partners was like, why are we going to call a Hillendale school Randallstown?
Mm-hmm.
Because, and his thing is, Randallstown is already an established name. So I want to continue with that. And I'm content with that. I even teach down. I drive down to Silver Spring twice a week to teach. I teach a jiu-jitsu class and a judo class.
That's awesome. What's his name? His daughter does pretty well, right? She competes. She does MMA.
He has 2 daughters. One is Liliana Suarez, and she's a purple belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and a monster in Muay Thai kickboxing. And then he has Christina Suarez, who just received a blue belt this past weekend from Hoist Gracie. Christina has dominated the kids division, like ran through the males, the females, and the last event that she competed in, which was Tap Cancer Out, she decided to do the adult female division, and submitted every woman in that division. So she is, right now, she's my assistant. Like, even as a child belt for all my techniques. It's like she's a sponge. She understands everything. So every class I teach, whether it's judo or jiu-jitsu, I can actually grab her, and instead of me performing the techniques on her, I have her perform all techniques on me. When it comes to throwing me, this is a young 15-year-old girl who actually can throw me with any throw that I tell her to throw me with. So his children are amazing when it comes to jiu-jitsu and judo. I mean, jiu-jitsu, Muay Thai, kickboxing, and judo. The youngest one, even though she does Muay Thai, her boxing is amazing as well. Her hand, she just hits hard. She hits hard for no reason.
It's great to see the evolution of jiu-jitsu coming through those young athletes, with the amount of technology we have nowadays, with better equipment, better nutrition, it's really good to see how they are bringing jiu-jitsu to another level. There's so many kids there. We watch at the tournament, I see some kids, they're training and they're rolling and competing like an adult division, and just time for them to hit the adult level and really show the difference.
So what I've seen over the years, like the talent that we have nowadays versus the talent that we had back in 2000, 2001 or 2, there's YouTube. You have YouTube now.
Mm-hmm.
And you have all sorts of avenues where everybody are looking at. And then they come to a jiu-jitsu school, and it's not like they're novice because they don't know the techniques, they never seen it. It's like they've seen the techniques, they probably practiced it at home, and now they're taking their first jiu-jitsu class, and they're not so much of a beginner. They're a beginner, but they're not so much of a beginner because they've been watching. Back when I started, there were VHS tapes out there, and it looked like it was so much snow in the VHS tapes, and you had to squint your eyes just to see what that technique was. So back then, I relied on my instructor. My first instructor at that time was a 4-stripe blue belt named Greg Thompson, who is an author of the H2H book that came out years ago. But I relied on all of my techniques, which Greg taught me. Greg and Aitor Canup both taught me, and Jason. So my main instructors were Jason Colbert, Greg Thompson, Aitor Canup, and Billy Dowie. So I relied on everything that they taught me back then. Versus now, your instructor can teach you something, then you can go to YouTube and find so many clips of somebody doing almost something similar to what you just learned in class. Then when I started my own school in Charlottesville, I bought every single book that was written by Kid Pellegro. And I would just go through the books, and every day I'm teaching class, and I'm pulling things from each of the books, just pulling something out of the books. And I just had my library of books, and that's how I taught. Then when videos started coming out on YouTube, I was like, nah, I don't want to learn them. I don't want to learn from the videos. I'd rather look at the books. Then when Hoist Gracie came up to me back in 2012 and said, know your self-defense, I knew at that moment I would be testing for my black belt. And then the primary book that I used was his father's master textbook, his cousin and brother Hola and Henzo book, which is called Theory and Techniques. So I used those two books, and I was just going through it, learning the self-defense like crazy. In every class that I taught, I would oversaturate my students with self-defense. Because under Hoist, self-defense aspect of jiu-jitsu is a huge part of his jiu-jitsu. And that's a huge part of his father's jiu-jitsu. So I had to learn, and I was, again, learning from those books. And that is when I first started looking at videos, because his father and his nephews were out there doing self-defense demonstrations. Instead of him going over like 2 or 3 times in a video, they would just show it. And what I would do is just look at that video, go backwards, look at it again, I would try to internalize every single technique. And under him, you can test. It doesn't necessarily mean that you will walk away with a black belt. But in 2012, I walked away with that black belt.
That's awesome. And under such a legend, right? Royce is it's a jiu-jitsu legend. You know, he will be always in the history for what he's done for the exposure of jiu-jitsu worldwide. You know, like UFC. He's the main character of UFC. You know, he really proved to everyone that jiu-jitsu was the best martial arts, using martial arts against a martial art. And he proved that to everyone that jiu-jitsu was the best martial art, is the best martial art.
So when I'm talking to potential students, and if they don't know who Royce is, if they're older, I always use this. Think about Bruce Lee. He's the Bruce Lee of jiu-jitsu. If they're younger, think about the Michael Jordan. I'll say he's the Michael Jordan of jiu-jitsu. And I will always tell people, whether you like Royce or not, without him, you might have jiu-jitsu in the United States, but it would not be almost on every corner. You would not have it around the world the way it is. And, in my opinion, he's probably created more jobs indirectly than most U.S. presidents. Because think about, you got a school, that school employs about 30 people. You got another school, they might employ 30 people. Throughout the world, people have staff members. Like me, I have 3 assistant instructors on staff, and I also hired 2 marketing interns. And I was talking to someone, and they were like, "You actually pay your interns?" Yes, I pay my interns. I give them something, because my 2 interns actually graduate from Stevenson University in May. So I'm giving them a whole year to work for me. One of them deals with my social media. One of them works on newsletters. And then if there are times where I need them to go out in the public, they go out in the public. They create proposals for me for programs that I might want to incorporate. Like recently, July the 26th, I incorporated a glow-in-the-dark class. Even though that's not going to be something that we do all the time, but I held a free glow-in-the-dark class at my school for the public, not just for my students. Mm-hmm. For the public, for my students to bring friends, and then by my students, by my marketing team advertising, there were some people from the general public who came. There was a gentleman who did not take the class, but he sat there and he watched. And there's a glow-in-the-dark class, and I had these flashing gloves on so he could see everything that my hands were doing. The next day, and this gentleman happened to be the brother to one of my marketing interns. The next day, she called me up and she said, "My brother used one of the self-defense techniques that you taught in class against somebody who kind of attacked him." And she said, "If I wasn't there to witness it, I would not even be able to tell you about it." And I was like, "Your brother didn't even take class." She said, "I know, he just watched." I was like, that's a great testimony. So, under Royce, the one thing I've learned, and I know there are a lot of instructors who actually teaches this, but they don't actually say it. But there are 5 elements to jiu-jitsu. You have striking. Striking is an element. Some jiu-jitsu schools don't actually think of it, but they actually teach like strike and defense. Mm-hmm. You have takedowns. Everybody teaches takedowns. You have self-defense. Not every school focuses on self-defense as heavy as I do, but they do teach self-defense. You have grappling. And then philosophy. And philosophy and jiu-jitsu is not like Confucius says or anything like that. It's more getting into the history. Or when you overly explaining a technique, that is like going into the philosophy of the technique, telling people why this works. Or you give scenarios of certain situations. So that is more of the philosophy talk. In my opinion, for every class I teach, I'm doing a philosophy talk.
Yeah, I believe in that too. And I always, when I teach, when I talk to people about jiu-jitsu, I always bring the lessons that we learned from the mats that we can implement in our lives. Sometimes we're struggling, we're in a bad position, and we don't see any solution. Hey, be calm and start thinking about the most effective way of getting out of that scenario. Like, don't freak out. Usually when you freak out is when you actually makes the biggest mistakes. So there's many lessons that we try to teach kids and adults daily, so we can become a better and more developed humans. So I believe in the same way, same things that you're saying. How we can use the jiu-jitsu lessons as a life philosophy to our lives. It happens to my life daily. I can definitely relate to that.
So one thing I believe about jiu-jitsu, and I believe that when you learn jiu-jitsu, that actually humbles a person. And I know, I use myself as an example. I left Baltimore in 1990 when I went in the military. And I left with this mentality, if somebody looks at me, I'm ready to fight. I started doing jiu-jitsu, and I realized I don't have to fight anymore. And when you're young, you're taught by your parents, walk away. You don't want to walk away because you don't want to seem weak. I started doing jiu-jitsu, and I'll smile, and I'll tell someone quick, it's not going to end well. That doesn't mean that I'm about to beat you up. That means one of us is going to lose, because I'm not invincible as a jiu-jitsu practitioner. It means you might get the best of me, I might get the best of you. But if I tell you it's not going to end well, it makes you second guess yourself. Like, do I really want to try this guy? He might know something. That's all I use. That's all I use to diffuse any kind of conflict that might potentially arise. I'll just say, it's not going to end well. And I'll say it as calm as possible, and then I'll walk away. Something that I could not have done 30 years ago. Walk away from a conflict. Because I used to like conflicts. So I'm not that person anymore.
That's good. I think you should teach us many lessons like that. I feel the same.
Now, I don't knock any martial art, any other martial art, because I think every martial art has its advantage. So I tell my students, I'm not like these other arts where they will say, don't use this in school. I will tell you, use it in school if somebody attacks you. If you are defending yourself, use it. That person who's picking on you could be the school bully.
Mm-hmm.
And you could look like this little meek and mild student. But if you allow that bully to pick on you, then everybody else is going to pick on you, because the bully kind of opens that door for other people to pick on you. But if you take down that bully is no longer going to be a bully, and you're going to gain the respect of anybody and everyone else. So use what you learn. And I'm a straight advocate of that. Like I said, when I was a child, I took karate before, and I said, don't use this in school. What's the purpose of taking that art if you're going to tell me not to use it in school? It's like a person who boxes. Why aren't you going to use boxing if you learn it? Wrestlers, they're going to take you down. So,
if it's necessary, I think you have to use it.
Right.
If if you need it, you should use it. I think it's a lesson that we all should know as a
Exactly.
humans. Sometimes you have to use. Sometimes you have to use violence to defend yourself.
Exactly.
Unfortunately, sometimes violence is the only solution you have, and I hope you know jiu-jitsu when you need that. Um, I th- I think when people talk about, oh no, go away, the school system nowadays, like, you're in trouble. If you're the one defend yourself, you're in trouble no matter what. And there is no. You just make the kid more unconfident because they get peak, they cannot do anything about it, and if they think they're gonna do about anything about it, they're gonna be in trouble. And I tell people, hey, I bet your family will be proud of you knowing that you were not going, got in trouble because you're protecting yourself. You're not a victim. And this, I think, can help a lot of things in our society nowadays. Sometimes it feels like they wanna really make the society weaker by um, by not allowing them to express themselves, by not allowing them to defend themselves, by getting in trouble, by protect yourself. If someone attack you and you hurt that person physically, they can sue you.
Hmm.
So someone attack you, you defend yourself, that person somehow hits their head on the floor, and they get some damage on their body, and now you get sued by defend yourself. um, I think sometimes that's kind of the way they try to make people in society weaker. Someone is hurting you, step in your house, whatever, and when you step up to defend yourself or your family, you are open to be sued or be in trouble for defend yourself. So I think there's something. Some things are kind of like being missed, between things by law, by I think politicians, and unfortunately, we see, like the new generation, we have such a strong group, but the majority of the new generation are getting weaker and
Oh yeah.
vulnerable and kind of like giving excuse. There is never their fault. Is never they don't stand up for themselves. So sometimes I really feel that's being triggered by some people up there triggering and making them weaker every next generation. So I don't know what's gonna happen, but as a professors, we need to be the change of it. We need to make our group and our community stronger. That's basically really what I look for nowadays. I really want to benefit our community. I believe all jiu-jitsu schools are almost a community center where we can develop kids, adults, women, help women to learn how to protect themselves, and be able to protect from being attacked. It's a high volume of women that get attacked of just by being women. I think that's how we stand up for that. And unfortunately, I don't know who, but they want to make the society weaker.
Right. So one thing I like about jujitsu, that jujitsu community, we almost like a fraternity. No matter where I travel, if I'm reaching out to a school, like if I travel overseas, I reach out to a school. A lot of times the instructors at that school want to put me up. Like I go overseas a lot. So I feel like we're like a fraternity. You can actually have bad blood with somebody in the jiu-jitsu community. But if someone in that jiu-jitsu community see you getting attacked, oh, they stepping in for you. At that moment, you two become friends. But once that issue is over with, once it's resolved, you go back to not being friends anymore. But I actually love the jiu-jitsu community because it brings us so close together. In jiu-jitsu, up and down the East Coast, throughout the United States and a lot of different countries, I know so many people. A lot of times when my students go to tournaments and people walk up to me and they speak, and my students always ask, how do you know them? This is 23 years of jiu-jitsu. That's how I know them. And now, it's sad to say that I don't know as many blue and purple belts as I did maybe 10 years ago. Now, I primarily know, like in the state of Maryland, know almost every black belt. Up and down the East Coast, same thing. I know almost every black belt because we have all been around each other. Our journey has been like that, where we all are around each other. So if I travel to your school and your school has a black belt in it, but a black belt is not there that day, and he has a purple belt covering for him, first thing he's going to do, hey, like my friend is coming in from town, a black belt, a Horace Gracie black belt is coming in town. Treat him well. You come into school and everybody make you feel like family. And that's what I like about the jiu-jitsu community. We try to make everybody who walks in our door feel like you're a blood relative. That's what we do. We make everybody feel like blood relative. The judo community in the area, I primarily know 75% of the judokas between North Carolina and New York. Because same thing, they treat you the same way. But I've never called a judo school and reached out and said that I'm coming in your country, your state, or whatever. I've never called. I normally look for a BJJ school because it's kind of easier to find a BJJ school.
I don't know many of the judo schools, to be honest. Primary judo?
I do.
I don't know.
I do know.
Is there any around here?
You have College Park Judo. You have, College Park, the only one that I know of in Maryland that does not have BJJ associated with it.
Mm-hmm.
So it used to be Beltsville Judo, but I know College Park, Beltsville. Charlottesville Judo used to just be primarily judo. So I can't really think of many.
Yeah. I think I know why. Because of Olympics. Because how politics control judo, and they don't allow the people to do what they're capable of doing, because it's more that's why sometimes people talk about jiu-jitsu in the Olympics. I'm very against it, because this that we're doing not gonna happen. Because now someone that doesn't even know anything about jiu-jitsu, that has a lot of politic power, that is going to step up here and tell us that we can and cannot do as a jiu-jitsu practitioners and black belts.
So what's going to happen, because this happened in judo, January the 1st, 2010, they took away touching the legs, grabbing the legs for a takedown. When I started my judo career, I won most of my matches with double leg takedowns. I remember hearing somebody yell, "Watch out, he's a wrestler." Now, I can't even teach double leg takedowns. I can teach it in my jiu-jitsu class, but I can't teach it in judo anymore. Let everybody know it's illegal. You can't do it. There's so many different, you're limited in judo to a lot of techniques that you once could do. And it's not like the American judo, it's the Olympic Committee that actually are providing these different rules. So, I mean, jiu-jitsu has rules now in place that wasn't in place when I first started. Like slamming. You could slam back in 2000, 2001. 2002. But I'm assuming after a lot of people got injured, the serious injuries, then he took that away. I remember like in 2006, you could do Kani Basami, which is flying scissors. You could do that in jiu-jitsu. I taught it to a school, and then when one of the gentlemen's student went out, did it on someone. This was either a grappler. It might have been a Grappler's Quest event. Once he did that, next thing I know, I heard flying scissors became illegal. So there's a lot of techniques that became illegal.
But that, when you see that, is mostly focused on the safety for the athlete, right?
Correct.
On the judo, for what I knew, what people told me back in Brazil is it was because one country wasn't winning with those rules, and they had to change the rules to make it more fair for this country to get back to the top ranking. I don't know if it was France.
No, so like when they took away touching the legs, the Olympic Committee said that we already have wrestling, and if you're going to continue to grab the legs, then we're going to take judo away, because now it's almost looking like wrestling with a gi on. So we don't need wrestling with a gi. We want to kind of separate the two sports. That's how it was told to us, along with the rules and everything else like that. So I don't know. I've never heard anything about one country versus another country, and I don't think that it was a factor in this.
Yeah, that's what some people that are involved with judo in Olympic level mentioned to me. You know, there's a lot of Newaza, high level guys back in Brazil. They train at same place I train in, Alliance Rio. And there's some. That's what I heard around. I was around them, But if you look back, that could be something that to look back and re-see it. I don't remember if it was France or Japan, because they wasn't winning anymore. So they had to adapt the rules because it becomes politics at that level. It's not about just the sport anymore. It's about the politics. Who can get more votes to whatever they were looking for? I think Olympics can really hurt jiu-jitsu. I don't think we should go that way.
Oh yeah, I agree.
I don't believe in a politician running jiu-jitsu. Do you believe?
No.
All right. No. So
I mean, technically, we do have politics in jiu-jitsu,
but they don't have the power to say what we can.
So a lot of these events follow certain rules of one particular entity in jiu-jitsu.
But the entity means it's rules. If you look back, those rules are being used back in Brazil in everywhere in the country. One federation started to becoming more international, but this rule set is very known in the Brazil country.
So think about it like this: if you're a blue belt and you throw on a brown rash guard, are they going to let you compete?
No.
So a rash guard should not dictate your belt color. You know why? Because when you are doing no gi, you're not a particular belt at that moment.
At no gi, you are.
You're not a belt. When you're no gi, there are 3 divisions in no gi: novice, intermediate, and advanced.
No. So at least PBJJF tournament, you have the ranking for each belt.
Okay.
So you compete at your belt level. So if you're white belt, compete at the white belt. Blue. So we do no gi jiu-jitsu. So we don't do grappling, right? Some tournaments might do grappling,
okay,
which is a mix of all arts. Then you have levels, wrestlers, but that's how we divide the jiu-jitsu. Us, you compete at your ranking. You don't compete at other ranking.
Okay. So I've seen this in the past where a 20-year collegiate wrestler jumped into the novice white belt division just because he was a white belt in jiu-jitsu. And it was like, that should not have ever happened. It should have never happened. They allowed him to do the white belt division, intermediate, and advanced. And in the advanced division, in the finals, he met up with me. And then I destroyed him. I destroyed him out of anger that they would allow him to go in and run through the novice division. And they used novice for people who, back then, they used people, novice was 6 months and under. This 20-year wrestler should not have been in that division.
Do you remember where?
It was a tournament down in North Carolina.
Are they still running? Does it exist?
No. No. That particular tournament doesn't exist anymore. But it's not because of that reason. I think the pandemic stopped a lot of the different tournaments that we used to have out here.
Yeah, the pandemic was definitely hurt the world. So many, I remember seeing the other different organizations, but they are not in business anymore. But I think we need those federations, those organizations to develop jiu-jitsu. You know, the evolution of jiu-jitsu comes from competition. You know, that's how you test your skills. That's how you test yourself. You test. If you look back the competition from 2000 to now, it's a different jiu-jitsu.
Oh, yes.
You know, because you do something, I gotta figure out what you're doing, and then we're consistently trying to be the best. So we have to keep evolving, figuring new things out. So I think that's the opportunity to grow with competing. You know, I think everybody should compete at least once so they can feel the real. It's the most realistic you're gonna get into a fight, right? You're gonna compete against someone, but it's under a rule set. It's there's a referee to be there to take care. The ref is basically to make sure the rules are being followed, and for your safety, you know, to stop whenever needs, and to make sure you have the point system running properly. And I think as a practitioner, you should compete at least once to really feel the. If you feel it's not something for you, don't do it. But I think at least once you should feel that, because you learn about yourself when you go to compete. Is then uncertain, you know, like you don't know what's gonna happen. Are you training enough? Are you focused on your best techniques? Are you able to execute the techniques you have been training? Are you able to put your game into work at that tournament? You know, it's so many particular things that it really make you learn about yourself. You know, they scare. Sometimes you're scared. You go, man, I don't know what's gonna happen. You know, you get scared of the outcome. You know, and then once you get more comfortable doing once, two, and you get more prepared and more confident. You know, and then you can start letting your jiu-jitsu work.
I know for children, competition is a confidence builder. For children, like, I used to have some children in my program who would second guess themselves just because they would lose to their teammates. And I always told my students, your teammates are your hardest opponents. They know your every move. So I had recent tournament, 2 little girls from my school. Father was like, I will support that event as long as their coach is there. I'm definitely going to be there. He got out there and he saw me coaching his daughters. And these little girls, one of them did not have as much confidence. The older one didn't have as much confidence as the youngest one. But she went out there, submitted 3 little boys. 2 of them cried.
That's awesome. 2
of them cried. And she didn't just win on points. She actually went out there and submitted 2 of the little boys. One little boy got so mad at her and he started punching and got disqualified.
Oh.
The youngest one went out there, and I just looked at her and she looked at me while she had him side mounted. And I just gave her instructions and said, "You know what to do." And then she turned around, submitted the kid. He cried, and she got up and she smiled. And at that moment, even though she won the next match, but at that moment, she didn't care if she won or lost any more matches. She went out there and submitted someone and was like, she was like, I don't even have to compete anymore. She didn't even care about the medal. The youngest one didn't even care about the medal anymore. She was like, I won. I went out there, I submitted. The father turns around and tells the mother, I really like that coach.
No, that's awesome. It's great when the coach can go and support the athletes at tournaments. I know it's hard for coaches to be in every single tournament, and I don't think you should only compete if you're a coach there. You should go. You should go and invite your teammates and your friends to come and compete. And if there's some other assistant or coach, I bet you can go to every single event.
So back in the day when I used to compete, it wasn't a lot of tournaments around, so I'd be online on MMA.tv searching for tournaments, and I would drive from North Carolina all the way up to Bayonne, New Jersey, because that's where most of the tournaments were. That was an 8-hour drive, and it would be over 2 days. So I would drive up to Bayonne for 8 hours, compete the first day, drive to Baltimore, stay with my mother, wake up the next day, drive 3 more hours back up to Bayonne, compete again, and then drive back to North Carolina. I used to do that all the time. There were a few times, maybe, I competed so much, it's ridiculous. I have over 400 matches under me. So, of course, my coaches were not at every event. And there was an event where about 10 of us drove up from North Carolina, and one of them happened to be my coach. So all of us competed. But other than that, like how you said, as a coach, you might not can be at everything. But a person like myself who competed as much as I competed, there's no way my coach is.
No way.
No way. No way.
You should not even consider that. If you're going to California, are you paying your coach
So I actually
airfare?
No,
I've been competing and coaching students all the way to California and many times, but it's not something that's sustainable for you to go every single time as a coach.
So one of my students qualified in the Judo Nationals, which was held in Vegas one year. And he knew that I did not like Vegas. I've never liked Vegas. I flew out to Vegas, got off the airplane. He competed. And I said, I'm heading back to the airport now. And it shocked my student that I flew out there, and less than 24 hours later, I'm back on the airplane heading back to Baltimore because I'm just not a fan of Vegas. Like I've had a student fly out to California. I flew out to California. Now I love California. I'll fly. I don't mind traveling. I've traveled. If I have a student who tells me that they want to compete in a certain place, I will go. Especially because that gives me an opportunity to travel. And by me saying this, it would almost seem like as if jiu-jitsu is a full-time job for me, but jiu-jitsu is definitely part-time because during the daytime, I'm a cybersecurity professional. And I'm a cybersecurity adjunct professor at a local community college in Baltimore. So jiu-jitsu is basically my side job. Even though I have a school, but I do other things full-time. And then I'm also a freelance photographer. So I try to keep myself busy.
That's good. I like it. I feel the same way, We're always doing something. It's a mentality.
I try to keep myself busy. And this is something that a lot of my students know, but a lot of people don't know. I have 9 college degrees, and I achieved 8 of my degrees since doing jiu-jitsu. No, I'm sorry. I've achieved 6 of my degrees since doing jiu-jitsu. So I have associates, 2 bachelors, 5 masters, and a doctorate degree. So I never tell my students to call me doctor. And then when I get new people coming into the school, and some of my students will call me doctor, and I'm like, I don't want the new people who comes in to think that my title is doctor as far as jiu-jitsu is concerned. But one of my students he's a doctor as well, but he will not stop calling me doctor. And then any friend he bring in, he introduced them to me as, this is Dr. Lamonte. And all of them call me Dr. Lamonte. And if they see me in the street, hi, Dr. Lamonte, hi, doctor. But I do know there's a martial art in Baltimore. I forgot what type of discipline it is, but they call all the instructors there doctor. And none of them have a doctorate degree. So in my opinion, you didn't earn that right to be called doctor.
True. In Brazil, there's 3 ways to become called doctor. By being a lawyer, which my wife actually is. Sometimes they called her and, hey, Dr. Amanda. So being a lawyer, being a medical doctor, right, and getting your PhD.
Right.
That's the 3 ways you're called doctor in Brazil. And here, dentist, a pharmacist.
You have physical therapists who have doctorate degrees. So you have applied doctorate and philosophical doctorate and educational doctors. So a lawyer, medical doctor, my doctorate in IT, they are all considered applied doctorate. Where your philosophical doctorates are the PhDs, and then your educational doctorates, like those who are in the education field and go and get EDDs. So there are 3 types of doctorates. Well, you also have honorary doctorates in the United States. So there are 4 types of doctorates that I can think of: the applied, philosophical, honorary, and education.
Yeah, no, that's. Hey, I'm a doctor in jiu-jitsu. 20 years every freaking day in jiu-jitsu.
Yeah.
I'm more than a doctor. We are. Hey, 20 years from competing at the highest level competition, traveling around and training hard daily and teaching Monday through Monday. I think when we put that amount of work, it's more than a PhD time if you look into hours.
When you say
unfortunately, we cannot call that.
When you say competing at the highest level, in 2010, when the World Masters was down in Brazil, I flew down there, I competed. I was in the brown belt division. Absolute division was like 20. It was about 20, ultra or super heavyweights down there. And when they came
where was it? Tijuca Tennis Club?
No, it was actually in Copacabana. 10 years ago. I mean, not 10 years ago, but 2010.
It was Masters Open, right?
It was Masters and Rio Open at the same
Rio
time.
Open, yes. They always put together.
Right. I went down
International Masters.
Right. So I went down there and they said, and next thing I know, after I won my last match, they came up to me and said, "You're in the finals." You don't know what that do for your ego. Once they tell you you're in the finals and there was 20 of you in your division, they say, "Go sit down and rest for about 5 minutes and then your next match." I was like, rest? Man, I got up and ran around the arena like crazy and would not sit down at all. Then I got out there and got disqualified in the finals and got a silver medal. And I never was upset over getting disqualified. Gentlemen had me in an armbar and I picked him up. And they He actually faked like I slammed him. And I said, karma. Because in wrestling in high school, I never lost a match at home. And this gentleman came in and slammed me in 4 seconds. And I faked like I was hurt. And I said, 20 years later, it caught up with me. And I never got upset over it. But I walked away with a silver medal. So in the International Masters, to have a silver medal, especially in the absolute division with that many brown belts. So that was one of my highlighted moments.
How was your experience in Brazil?
It was actually great. It was great because I have a buddy of mine called a friend and told that friend that I was coming to Brazil. That friend had a gentleman come pick me up from the airport, and they took me to this hotel. I didn't have to pay for the rides to and from the airport, nor did I have to pay for the hotel. Then that same person came and picked me up, and she took me around so that I could actually get to see Brazil.
Where did you stay in Rio?
Copacabana. Right. So she just took me different places, and one spot that she was like, "Do you remember seeing this spot in Snoop Dogg's video?" So
probably Lapa.
Yeah. So right on the stairs. Yeah. So I hung out there, where the statue was, but I was like, I have to go train at Gracie Humata.
Gracie Humata.
So I was like, I'm not just going to come down here and compete. I need to go and train as well. And I remember Salo coming up, and Salo was teaching class while I was down there. And Salo looked around and said, "Do we have any foreigners down here?" And I'm looking around, I was like, this is strange. No one raised their hand. I said, okay, since we don't have any foreigners down here, I guess I can speak in Portuguese. And then I realized I am the foreigner. I am not used to being called a foreigner. So that was kind of funny for me.
How was the training? How did you feel? The energy, the different energy? How was it?
In my opinion, when it comes to rolling in class, you roll harder in the United States. Down there, back in 2010, they didn't roll as hard as me. They actually was rolling to perfect the techniques. Whereas me, I was there rolling like as if I was in a tournament. So I actually learned down there that you should have a lot more patience when it comes to rolling versus being an overly aggressive person when you're down on the mat. And now that's the one thing I teach my students. Like, we're in class. If a brand new white belt come in and it almost seems like that white belt is about to catch you, let it happen. It's a learning experience for you. Let it happen. Because if you don't know how to defend it versus getting all aggressive, you're never going to know how to defend it. You're going to learn from your mistakes.
Desliga, e liga de novo. Espera pouquinho. No, we're good. We're good.
All right. I'm like, I tell my students all the time, use that person's aggression against them by perfecting the technique. Because jiu-jitsu is not about muscling people. It's about the technique. Like, the original purpose of jiu-jitsu is to show that a much weaker person can take on a larger opponent, or larger or stronger opponent. So if we don't keep that mentality while we're in class, you'll never ever learn how to compete.
Or improve your jiu-jitsu as well, because you're going to be relying on your physical athleticism. And I've seen this happening many times. The guy's very strong, and then he quits for a little bit, and then he comes back and he starts getting demolished by the other people. And what happened? The ego is so high that he never learned how to really take it, a loss. They quit. I think it's important. I personally like to teach my students, they're not allowed to roll until they have their second stripe, which is minimum of 60 classes. because it really develops your technique first until you're actually able to grapple, wrestle, roll with the technique. So if you're going to roll on your first day, you're not doing jiu-jitsu. You're just spazzing around, trying to survive, and there's a high chance of injuries when we do that. So back in Brazil, when I started jiu-jitsu, they just threw me on the Shark Tank. Survive, that's the way. My first professor people would come and watch from the window. He would kick people out. Get out of here! This is not a move theater. Get the hell out of here! I was like, they're your client. But he was old school. He was a Carson Grace black belt student. So Carson was the old school mentality. The guys were very tough and intense. So then you learn how to actually getting beat and figuring out the technical aspect of it. And then you build specific training, stuff like that. That's how I like to help my students to develop, because you see many people quitting in the beginning because of injuries. They start rolling so too early that they get hurt. This happened consistently. If you look around, if you see data, you're probably that data person. At our school, we have data. What happened? This happened. Okay. Why is this happening?
Right.
Why? Is this my fault? Is this the program's fault? What is happening? So, and then we try to cut around the roots, So you're very part of data-driven person, right?
I am, and a lot of times I make sure every one of my students get to roll with me, and that data a lot of times come from rolling with that student, learning that person's ability. So if I know I got a student who's very spastic, I'm not going to let that spastic person roll with a new person. That spastic person needs to roll with more seasoned belts. But then it'll come to a point where when that person start asking questions, then I'll actually explain. Because I've never had somebody get injured in my school. But I make it my business to roll with new students. And there's one thing I do. They tell me I play possum. I'll let you go for every technique you can think of in the book. I'll play possum. But I'm never going to try to hurt that person regardless of how spastic they are. And one thing, like with a new student, I like taking a new student to the side and I'll teach them Americana real quick and let them keep on practicing on me. This is like after I get finished working technique. And I was showing them Americana, keep on going. And the reason why I like doing that, because then I'll roll with them and then I'll give them Americana and see if they can catch it. And I give people Americana. I don't care what belt you are. I normally give it to you. And now as a black belt, when people know they're being baited, because in my 23 years, I've never been submitted with Americana. So I try to give people that just because I know it's very difficult to submit me with that. And then I'll also give a choke up. Not to say that I can't be choked, but I try to teach my students how to relax when you get choked. Because I'll tell them, I can put you to sleep in 5 seconds. But it'll take you over a minute to put me to sleep with the same choke, even if you apply it correctly. Why? Because you're going to get tired before I do, and I'll teach you how to relax. And as you're choking me, I'll even show you that I'm breathing. So I try these little techniques with new students and older students. Like I'll even, when I roll with my students, and I know they're going for a choke, I lift up my neck for them so I can expose my neck all the way so that they can get their choke. Now, when it comes to Americana, they're like, don't go for it. They'll tell everybody, don't go for that. He's playing. He's messing with you. You're not going to get it. So I just love having fun. And one thing I tell people, when you go to a school and if you have an instructor there who's trying to kill you while rolling, that's not a good instructor. Because Most instructors feel like they need to stay on top. But if you can teach a student to beat you, then as an instructor, you did your job. Me, I always give my students openings when we roll. Always. Now it's your job to capitalize on that opening. Am I going to defend it? I am going to defend it without being spastic. I'm going to defend everything I give you. But you must be a great instructor, because once you provide your students with these different openings, then your students will be able to see. I mean, you will be able to see their level. Like, all right, I gave him a triangle, I gave him an armbar, I gave him a Kimura, a cross collar choke. I'm giving them this. Now you see that your students are able to see every single opening that you're providing them. And they don't even realize that you're giving them those openings, but you're giving it to them. And you just hope that they are actually capitalizing on whatever you give them. Whether, like I said, whether or not they finish it, they need to keep on striving to get it. Because then when it comes to competition and they see these openings, the person who they're competing against might not know how to defend it like I know how to defend it.
That's smart. I have some students that I can allow them to get any chokes on me. I have a student, Eric. He is putting so many people to sleep in tournaments from baseball bat choke that if he gets, it will be tight. You cannot allow him to go for the choke, because he gonna put. I've seen he put at least 10 people to sleep, easy. It's insane. So when I train with him, I don't even allow him to get there. As soon as I feel it happening, I break the grip and don't allow the choke to happen, because I know if you get it, it might be too tight.
Now, I would never say that I can't get choked, because I remember I was doing a tournament. I can't even remember Kenny's last name, but Kenneth Brown. He went for a choke on me, and I'm just laying there playing possum, praying that Kenny let that choke go, because it was nice and tight. And I heard somebody yelling, he sleep. So the referee comes over, and I give a thumbs up so that Kenny don't see it. And Kenny still held that choke until I eventually tapped. But I tried my best not to. If I was competing and they go for a choke, I try my best not to let them know that they have it. I've actually, in a judo tournament, I allowed myself to go to sleep. But for the most part, most people who choke you, if they don't think that they have it, what's the first thing they do? Readjust. When you readjust, you give me time to breathe. Kenny never readjusted. He never gave me time to breathe. Actually, I got choked by 2 people. Kenny, and I know if people are watching, they'll know Kenneth Brown. And Kim, I don't know how to say his last name. It began with an S. Dr. Kim. Begin with an S. He caught me in the same choke he reversed the choke that I was doing on him. But other than that, it's very, very difficult. It was this black belt that came from Brazil, from team, 3G or G3?
G13.
G13. He held a choke on me for like 5 minutes. And then the other 5 minutes was Americana. And at the end of the match, he was like, I don't know why you didn't tap, but I know I had it. One of my students, when he put the Americana on me, one of my students was like, I think Lamont is about to tap for the first time for the Americana. And when he saw that gentleman take my elbow and take my arm and bend it all the way back to where my elbow touched the floor, everybody thought I was about to tap. And then when I got up off the mat, they were like, are you okay? I said, from what? That Americana. And then I remembered it. It's like, I didn't feel.
Do you have flexible shoulders?
It's not even that. I don't know what it is. I just know that when somebody cranks on me, I've never tapped from it, because it's never ever hurt me. You can put me in every other submission when it comes to joint locks. Oh, they're gonna hurt. But Americana, it's never happened. And because of that, there have been some black belts like, all right, you know what? I'm gonna be that one to get you. And this is like going to their school and they're going for it, and they literally go for it just to see if they can actually be the first person to catch me. And it's never happened.
That's awesome. Yeah, but then maybe people out there will try to when they come and visit you, they will try the Americana.
It's okay. It's okay. It's okay. I would love for people to come visit me.
That's awesome. So, what's your plan for the future? What are you looking for the future of your school and your career as a professor? Maybe coming back to compete?
No. I'm almost 51 years old. And I know 51 is not old when it comes to competing in jiu-jitsu, but I've had 3 surgeries on one of my wrists. Even though now I'm back to sparring in Muay Thai, but my wrist does not bend. So whenever I spar, I got to tape it real tight. So I'm not going to...
What happened?
Sad to say, I was cutting grass and tore a ligament. Freak accident.
Serious?
Yeah. Freak accident. Tore a ligament, and I waited over a year to get it fixed. And then they had to remove a scaphoid bone out of my hand with the first surgery, put a plate and 7 screws. I believe that the doctor took the cast off too early because one of the screws broke. So when they went in, they found out the other 6 were loose. So they had to remove that screw, drilled a hole in my arm, and did a bone graft. And for the second surgery, like they put 3 new screws in. One of the screws started protruding out of my wrist, so they pulled that screw out. Then the third surgery, they had to, that was the third surgery, but they had to go back in and cut me open again because scar tissue wrapped around a nerve, and it felt like my pinky was being cut off. So they had to clean up the nerve. As of right now, they told me I'll never be able to bend my wrist again because it's fused. So, but I can still roll. I still roll with my students. Like I said, I put on the boxing gloves recently. Started sparring with my Muay Thai student. But I'm not going to compete anymore. I need to be more concerned about my health over anything else. And
True.
What do my future look like with BJJ? So after I finally retire from working for someone else, I'll probably open up my school full time for myself. So that would be the ultimate goal.
Focus on building up your school, your students.
Correct. Right now, I'm loving my jiu-jitsu family at my school. They're not my only family. I have other jiu-jitsu families in the area that I consider my jiu-jitsu family. Also, twice a year, I get with all the Hoist Gracie black belts, where Hoist will have 2 gatherings a year. And it's almost like a family reunion when we all get together. So I want to be able to do that and have those black belts coming in and always feel like they're amongst family when they come around my students. Like I said, Hoist was just here this past weekend at my school. And
I didn't know that.
yeah, so he was at my school, and then he was down at the Hillendale school as well. And my students used to be like, I did not realize how close you and Hoist were. Like, Hoist stayed with me Friday through Sunday. So, real close to Hoist. I've been knowing him. I mean, just the first time I ever watched UFC was June 2003 with Hoist. He and I have traveled to Israel together to teach classes. Because of him, I had people coming up to me asking me to sign their gis, and I was a brown belt at the time. So they made me feel like a celebrity as well.
You're with that legend. He's definitely a legend. Let me know when he comes next time. I'll definitely want to come by and
Definitely
attend the seminar if it's open for
yeah,
other people.
Yeah, it's open. It's open. It's always open.
That's awesome. Hey, Professor, so we're about to finish. I really appreciate you coming here today. Such a great conversation. we didn't even get to the point that we talk about artificial intelligence. And I want to ask you, maybe the next time you come here, so we have the mugs. So
Okay.
we're about to finish the first season, and the next season is when we bring another mug. So we're gonna have a collection of mug, but the only people that receives the mug is people that actually comes to the podcast. So
Okay.
special
Okay.
mug for special people.
Well, I appreciate that.
I appreciate you coming here today to talk with us and share your knowledge and your experience. You want to give a shout out to someone before we close up?
So, my primary school is Gracie Randallstown in Randallstown, Maryland. The address is 3535 Brentbrook Drive. And if you're ever in the area, please stop in. We'll be happy to have you. I take children as young as 2 years old. And if you are an instructor out there and want to know how to teach children that young, record them while you're teaching them a technique, and then let them look at that recording, and that child do not want to make a mistake. And this is something that I tell all parents. If you see your children out on a mat and you think that they're not paying attention just because they're running around, let them run around. And then when you get home, ask your child to show you what it was that they just learned in class. And I promise you, it might not be perfect, but they will show you exactly what they did in class. So that's my shout out to the parents.
2 years old is
Take them as young as 2.
young.
Take them as young as 2. Think about it. The Gracies started off that young. So,
Congrats. You're a hero. 4.5 to 5 for me.
2.
We have hundreds of kids at our school. You know, we divide them in different programs. But I tried 3 years old.
I have 2 assistants, and those 2 assistants teach my kids' program. And I taught them how to teach a 2-year-old.
How many students per class you hold? 2 years old.
Well, I don't have that many 2-year-olds. I've only had 2 2-year-olds in the program.
How many people kids in that room?
And it would be up to 25.
That's-
But if there are 2-year-olds in a school, like even though my kids instructors teach the kids, then I'll get on the mat. If there are any more 2-year-olds, 2 or 3-year-olds, I'll get on the mat so that I can focus on them.
the other group.
I'll even let my kids instructor teach the techniques while I'm there. And they're blue belts. I'll let them teach the techniques, and I'll work directly with those young ones.
I see. That's a 2-year-old. Congrats. But Professor, thank you so much for coming today. It's a pleasure to have you here. I'm looking
you for
forward
having
to
me.
see you at the
We'll be there.
PBJJF Summer Open, the
We're-
Baltimore Summer Open. And this year also having our first Worlds in October. We have the first PBJJF Worlds, and I think it's such a great opportunity for people to be part of the beginning of a new huge federation. You know, like if you join and become a world champion in the early days of PBJJF, that's gonna stick for the whole history. You know, if you look back, the champions of other federations from 1995, they're still in the Hall of the Fame for this federation. So that's the approach.
The one thing about tournaments, it actually brings a lot of people together. One of my students competed against a gentleman at one of the PBJJF events. They became friends on social media immediately after. And the next day, and they felt like they were real close. And they hung out with each other throughout the tournament. And then the next day, this young man was killed by a drunk driver.
I think I know who it is.
Yeah. That gentleman was killed by a drunk driver the next day. And it was such a shock to me because when I saw him rolling, when I saw him competing, I said, I went up to my student and said, you got to compete against him. And he looks like you competing. He looks like you rolling. So when you go against him, it's going to be like rolling against yourself. And that's why they became such good friends, because it was like he was rolling against himself. That was a hard pill to swallow. And then I found out some people who I actually competed against, same thing, was killed by a drunk driver.
That's terrible. Actually, I think he was Max's student. Mac has his photo behind on the back of his phone.
Yeah, he was his student.
Yeah, I know who he is.
Yep.
So sad. When he told me too, I was like, man, I couldn't believe,
Like, I didn't know the kid, but I couldn't believe it either, because it was like I felt a connection immediately after that tournament.
Yeah, I think it was in the Silver Spring event, right? Or was the
It was
Silver Spring event,
yes,
right?
It was.
I remember that was so sad. People, if you drink, don't drive, please.
Yeah, exactly.
Don't drive. Respect the law. Get a Uber. Just get a Uber. For your life and for other people's lives,
Man, I quit drinking 23 years ago. 31 years ago.
Congrats.
I started 32 years ago and quit a year later. So
I personally don't drink.
I just don't like how it tastes.
Yeah, I don't think alcohol is any beneficial for anybody.
No.
And it's legalized, but I don't think it's beneficial. Doesn't bring much benefits for people.
I just don't like the taste.
Yeah. I don't like the taste, the feel.
I didn't like the feel.
And so don't. If you drink, that's actually a slogan in Brazil. They have many of marketing. I don't know how it is in the U.S., to be honest, because I don't watch much TV. So they always have a slogan: "Hey, if you drink, don't drive. If you're going to drive, don't drink." Like it's heavy on this propaganda in Brazil about educating, at least trying to educate the people. And also in Brazil, they had something called Lei Seca. They create checkpoints everywhere.
Yeah.
Checkpoints, and you getting losing your driver's license, and you get in big trouble if you're.
I seen that in North Carolina.
It does that happen in North Carolina too? They have the checking points for that would happen in Brazil. I think from 2009 to now, I think they still doing like heavy checkpoints to check if people are driving, drink. And another thing, if you're driving, no cell phones.
Oh yeah.
Cell phone is dangerous too. It's the same thing as drinking. I've seen some testings where they get a drunk person, a person using their cell phone while they're driving, is the same reflex, when it comes to an accident. So we learn a lot about that segment. Don't drink. Don't use your phone. If you use your phone, go on the seat, passenger seat. And so, Professor, again, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. I'm holding you here a lot. I'm really looking forward to see you and your students at Baltimore Summer Open and the Worlds as well.
We'll be there.
Yeah. Thank you guys for tuning in. Just want to give a quick shout out to our sponsors, Santos Law Firm, a high-profile immigration office that will help you with the visas that you need to come or stay in the United States. And Brave Kimonos, our gear sponsored since the beginning. Thank you so much, Brave. And we also have Perkins Dental Care. I actually have a QR code that people can go and right on top of your head, right there. You see that? Right there. It's right there. Right on top of your head. And so you guys can...
maybe up here.
Right here. Yeah, right there. It's on the computer. There's a QR code. You guys go to the QR code. And if you're watching, if you want to give some support, you don't have to be financial or anything. Give a like, subscribe, and also go to their social media. Go to their last post and tell them. Go to Santos Law Firm and say, hey, I just saw the podcast and PBJJF is doing a great job with your company. They're advertising very well. You should keep it up with them. So that's the way of you guys giving the support. Telling the sponsors that, and Brave as well, telling the sponsors that we are in the business. Thank you so much, Professor. Appreciate